how we got started with this whole thing. I think there's a lot of new people here, a lot of old faces as well that have been to CakeFest before. This is the third one. We did, the last one was in Buenos Aires, and we did one in Orlando before that. So who knows where the next one's going to be. So anyway, I'm just going to go through a little bit about Cake. First, I'm going to start out. This is me. I started studying history and philosophy, then got a business and law degree, and then started programming open source about 10 years ago. And been involved in the project since, well, I'll go through. This is kind of the beginning. Brief history of Cake is April 15, 2005. So that was pretty much like 4 years ago. It's very simple MVC. Cake was released. No associations in the models, no real, a lot of features missing, but at the same time a foundation that we could start building off of and something that we could see happening. July 2nd, 2005. CakePHP.org launched. So that's kind of, when the project itself as an open source project started, right? Larry Masters took over at that point, and PHP now. And he was spearheading and developing and putting a lot of effort into the project, and still does. And so that's kind of the beginning of what we're all here talking about, I think. July 6th, shortly after that, the original developer, Mike, he decided to leave because he didn't think that there was much of a focus, that there was no visionary project leader. Didn't think that it was going to really come together as it did. Larry kept pushing it forward and wanted to see it grow, always had a passion for it. And in August, Nate joined the project and got a sandbox and started committing to the core. And then in October, that's when I joined as the project manager. So why did I get involved, or why is CakePHP here, and what have we been trying to do? Well, I've talked about this before, but basically, before we had a framework, we had just a mess of code, and we can look at it in philosophy. There's Hobbes, and he talks about a state of nature. And in the state of nature, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And the same analogy can be made with what it was like coding before without a framework. We all had our own little frameworks that we worked on. Nobody could share. We shared some ideas, we shared some class, we shared some code, some functions here and there. But in essence, we were on our own. And it was a hard road, and it was tough going. So we organized and we formed this social contract, which comes from John Locke. And the goal there was to promote our freedom, protect it, and allow us all to pursue this happiness that we can see today. I think we're all a lot happier now than we were 5 years ago or 4 years ago. The goal, again, was to bring some order to this chaos, and that's what this framework was really all about. And I think that's why we're all here. We all share this same goal, and we realize that ultimately having this structure allows us and gives us more freedom, because now we can go out and actually explore the real kind of application development that we want. And we can actually look at not dealing with the crud over and over again, and we can actually start looking at real features and the real important stuff that we want to have. And it really allows us to explore new ideas in a rapid way, right? We can come up with a new idea, and 3 days later we can have an example of that available for some other people to see. And that's why I think it really gives us that freedom to explore. The basic principles that we've tried to have in here, a lot of these came from Ruby on Rails. We've applied some of our own, but having intelligent default. defaults, right? So that we can have this convention over configuration stuff, right? That's what the defaults are really all about. And we try and use them in a way that makes it possible for us to write simple, readable code. A lot less code. Less code means less maintenance. Less maintenance means more freedom to explore new ideas, right? So that was the goal. Limit the features out the door, right? But provide the flexibility and the extensibility so that you can do the things that you guys need to do, right? And then we've always had this idea, and this really came from Larry, was to make things work and then make them work better. You know, I don't think that there's anybody here, and I'm not going to stand up here and say that the code inside of Cake is perfect, but it works, and it works pretty well. And every single day that we commit to the core, we're making it work better. And that's why we've got optimizations and we've got bugs, and we really focus on making things work better. And it's more important to us to see the code that we have in the core work better than it is to just keep adding new things to the core, right? So these things all really tie together. And ultimately, what we like to do is try and release early, release often, because that allows you guys to really explore. I think we have an advantage now with version control systems that basically allows a lot of people to use the latest, greatest code without us having to release it. But we've got nightly releases that come out, and the source code repository. I was just checking, and there's hundreds, thousands of developers that actually pull directly from the source code repository. So they're getting the latest, greatest code all the time. And we try and maintain stable branches so that people can always have those updated fixes, right? You might be taking a little bit more of a risk using it, but at the same time, we really make an effort to do that. And if you do use the latest code from the repositories, then that's a really good way to contribute back, because you're the ones that can file tickets on it, things like that, after you find a problem, right? So one of the important things for us as an open source project, and I think that this applies to, this is kind of some of the things that I've learned being a project manager on this project for the last 4 years, and something that I think that everybody can apply to their own teams and how we do it. I mean, open source to me is a very unique experience in development, right? These guys, everybody that contributes to the core does it because they like doing it, not because they have to do it. They're not getting paid to do it. They do it because they get some benefit from it, whether it be having things work for them, for the projects that they're working on, or because maybe some recognition that they get from the community. And I think that if we take those same principles, apply them to our commercial work, our teams all around really benefit from it. So one of the things is consensus-driven development. I think this is kind of a concept of looking at each member of the team as a valuable voice, right? Even if somebody disagrees, right, that disagreement is going to ultimately define what the outcome is of your goals, right? So if you can strive for consensus, meaning logically, rationally bring these ideas together and get everybody to understand what those common goals are, right? Even if they might not fully agree with it, they recognize that this is where things need to go, because this is where people want to go, right? And so you don't really have, there's no voting, there's no minorities and majorities and things like that. Everybody eventually agrees that, okay, we're on the right track, right? And it's been this way inside of Cake for 4 years. And I think that's one of the strengths, and that's one of the reasons why this project has done so well, and I'll show you some of the things at the end, but it's because we've always agreed on what the goals are. So the other thing is to challenge and incentivize. This is what people contribute because it's either a challenge or because they have some incentive to do it, right? They're not, like I said, they're not getting paid to work on the core. So we have to come up with new ways of getting them to do the work that we're all here to benefit from. And challenges, new challenges, things like coming up with a new way to solve, or a new way to cut down the number of lines of code that we need inside of our controllers or our models, right? Those are the kinds of challenges that we want, and the incentives that you create from that usually are things like, okay, well, here's more responsibility, right? This is one of the things I was talking about with the guys last night, is that what I've seen is actually the more responsibility that you give to an individual developer, the greater incentive they have to be involved, right? So in your own projects, and whether they be commercial or whatever, even a younger or junior level developer, somebody with less experience, try and give them a little bit more responsibility than you would think they would actually be able to handle, right? Because that's the challenge, and the incentive for them to succeed with that challenge, right, is to see them actually accept that responsibility and meet the goals, right, of the project. Be polite. This is like the hardest one, right, obviously. We've all got major, serious opinions, especially in open source. And, you know, there's been stuff going around in other communities about presentations and being polite in your presentations and professional, right? And that can carry down to every level of the development. And ultimately, if you look at things rationally and you try and respect what everybody else has to say and understand where they're coming from, all of a sudden everybody wants to be more involved, everybody's happier to be on the team, and you can move forward a lot faster. Design, test, review, and document. This is kind of our process of how the team does it. So we'll talk about some ideas, but ultimately, you know, one person will kind of design the functionality that they want to see. They'll test it, write test cases for it, show it to the rest of the team, and we'll review it. And then once it gets in there, we can document it, right? And so this is kind of an approach we've started to take more and more as the project has matured, and it's been working out really well. And then refactor and optimize comes after that, right? That's the make it work better part, right? So you know, we're always constantly trying to minimize the amount of logic that we need to achieve the functionality that we want, and we try and do that in the fastest way that we can. But that comes second, right? So what's a good team member, right? And how can you be a good team member on your own team, and how can you get other people to be good team members? And so a good team member to me communicates a lot, right? They communicate what they're working on, they communicate what they're able to work on. You know, one of the biggest things for us, like I said, is like everybody's giving their free time to this project, and from a project manager's perspective, it's really important for me to know where that time ends, right? So if you're going to accept a responsibility, which is great, and all of a sudden, you know, you move on and you say, well, you know, I actually would rather work on this other project instead, or this other piece of the code instead. You need to communicate that as soon as you start to move away from it, right? And the same thing happens in your job, right? If all of a sudden you feel like, okay, I'm really not motivated to do this kind of work anymore, right? What can you do? What can you do in order to change that so that you do become motivated? If you're not communicating often, then there's no way that anybody's going to be able to help you. There's no way that you're going to be motivated to keep working on it. So that's what showing gifts and getting feedback are all about. So we do this a lot inside of the dev channels, is that we show each other, you know, what we're working on. We show each other, what do you think of this, right? And you know, a lot of the time, somebody else will have a perspective, and somebody else will see something in there and say, well, what if you do it this way, you know? And, you know, try something different, and then, oh yeah, that sounds great, you know? So it's not something that, you know, it's one of those things where you can't really look at the code and be like, oh my gosh, this is my code, this has got to be the way it is, I wrote it, you know, we're never going to change it, right? That's really that's not the idea. That's not what growth is all about. That's not what learning is all about. That's not what producing the best code is all about. The best code comes from the best ideas coming from multiple people working on it, having multiple different perspectives, multiple eyes, right? And that's what and then the next thing that I always try and think about is think longer and that allows you to write faster, right? So you spend more time thinking about your code than you actually do writing. And sorry, I'm going to grab my clock, so I'm out of time. I forgot that. I'm good, I'm going fast. All right, so you think about your code longer than it actually takes to write it, you know? And this is a concept that actually a lot of times we have trouble doing. And sometimes thinking about code actually means sitting down and writing some code too, right? Sometimes you got to get your ideas down on paper in order to see, you know, if you're going in the right direction or not too. But ultimately, you know, if you can think about the logic that's involved in the step-by-step process that you need to get through this code, you're gonna write the final piece of code a lot faster too, and it's going to be clearer for everybody else. And in the long run, it's going to be much easier to maintain, right? Maybe you have to do less refactoring, less optimization. Details, details, details. To me, this is like one of the most important things that any team member can really focus on. And it's one of the things that we skip over the most often, I think, because we're in a rush, or we want to get something done. We've got some sort of deadline that somebody put on us, right? And all of a sudden, the details go out the window. But those are the most important things. Looking at each line of code and really saying, is this the right piece of code? Every tab being in the right place. Those are the kind of details we're talking about. Every dot block being in the right place. These are the things that, you know, they seem minor and they seem insignificant, but those are the kinds of details that I think when you start focusing on them, the rest of your code becomes more detail-oriented as well, and it becomes clearer and it becomes easier to maintain. Give back more than you take. I mean, this comes from ideas. This comes from you know, code that you share. This comes from a number of different things. But if you're, the more you help other people, actually, the more you benefit. And that's one of the things that I've really found out over the last 4 years, and I've really come to appreciate it a lot, is that every single time I've helped somebody in the Cake IRC channel, for instance, I feel like I learned something new too, you know. And that's, you know, and it's just a tremendous benefit. So you're not only being a good team member there, but you're also being a good community member, and you're being a good company member if you're inside your own company, right? And then think outside the box. We always try and do that. Everybody's trying to come up with a new way of doing something, but at the same time, you know, especially inside of a framework, which seems like it gives you so much structure, right? It's a box, and you can move outside of it. I always laugh when people come and they say, oh, well, it's too strict. You know, Cake is too strict. I can't do what I really want to do, or I can't do this, and I can't do that, right? It's all about what you can't do. And clearly, they haven't been thinking about it for very long, right? Because otherwise, they would have been able to get outside the box, and they would have been able to say, well, wait a second. Actually, Cake does allow me to do exactly that, right? It's just in a different way. It's not that it might not be the same approach that you would have taken before, and it's different. It might be, you know, so it might be a different approach, but at the same time, you know, it solves your problem in a better way. And if it doesn't, if you find that all of a sudden, okay, well, you know, I spent a lot of time thinking outside of the box here. I still wasn't able to get to where I wanted to get to with the structure that I have. How do we improve it, right? That's when you start getting back, right? That's when you go back up and you say, okay, well, what could we have done differently, right? What could Cake have done differently? You know, what could we have done differently in our own project in order to make this easier for us? So these are just some of the ways I think you can be a good team member. So we've got this society, and I talked about that social contract, and we're all kind of team members in it, right, as members of the community. And these are some of the ways, and I've gone over this in a couple places before, but how you can contribute back to the Cake society, right? And you know, there's you know, the no effort, right? And the simplest way to really get back is with the ticket system, right? We try and we strive for having a ticket system inside of a company. We have a good ticket system that everybody uses, you know, inside of the project. we've got a ticket system that everybody uses, right? And we want that feedback from the community. The more tickets we have, the more, that's an indication to me of the success of the project, right? I actually want to see more tickets, you know, whether they be bugs or enhancements or optimizations or whatever. The more tickets we have, that means the more people out there are using it, right, and contributing back. But there's ways, like I said, that you can do it, and you can make no effort, and that's when you got a ticket with almost no explanation. You don't really mention any steps to duplicate the problem, and you don't even put it in the right location on the ticket tracker system. So literally somebody probably spent about 30 seconds, typed in a summary up top, and then hit submit and took off and went to have lunch or something. I don't know, but that's not really the best approach, right? We want to encourage more contribution. We want to encourage people to become better members of this society, of this community, and so then there's some effort. You can supply a well-explained ticket with steps to reproduce, properly categorize it, and that helps, right? We have hundreds of tickets in the system that are like that now, right? And those give us a perspective of what people are looking for and what people want, and sometimes what problems they're having that they might not understand, right? But at least in that way, we can really channel the effort that somebody made, that bit of effort that they made. We can channel that effort in the right places, right? We can either say, no, this is really a problem, you know, solve this on the Google group or something, right? Or we can solve it ourselves. We can write our own test case for it if it's a simple one, because some stuff is really easy for us to just whip up and get it done, right? Then there's the attempted effort, which is really getting there. You know, I mean, it's all that other stuff, the well-explained ticket, the reproducing the issue, the proper categorization, but then you attempt and you actually make a patch, right? That's kind of a way of saying, look, I really, you know, I thought about this for a while. I tried to locate the issue. I learned a lot more about the core code, and maybe this is a way to fix it. I don't know how to write test cases yet, but you know, I want to help out a little bit more than I would if I just, you know, wrote up some ticket, right? And that's great too, you know, and those always help. They give us some perspective on how you're using it sometimes. But then you can go even further, right? And you can make that same effort, right? The well-explained ticket and whatnot, but then you can actually you can write a test case for it, right? And that takes, you know, it takes setting up the test suite, and it takes, you know, opening it up in the browser probably, and then going in there and looking at it and going, okay, now how am I going to actually, you know, maybe I can look at some of these other test cases and try and understand how they work, right? And then adding one of your own in there and running it and seeing if you can get a fail, right? I mean, that's the goal. The goal is to see if you can get that red bar to show up, and then once you do, you can say, here guys, I got this red bar, you know? But maybe through that process, you find out that you were actually using it wrong, right? Or maybe you find out that really there isn't a problem there, maybe the problem is somewhere else, right? So, and the nice thing is that throughout this whole thing, there's people there to help, you know? There's other community members, there's other members of the society that have done this stuff before that are there, and they want to help, you know? And they want you to contribute back because they know it's going to benefit them just as much, right? So, and then we can make the ultimate effort, and that's going above them, you know, that's kind of like saying, okay, I know exactly where the problem is, I found it, I got the red bar, I'm gonna patch that thing up, I know how to do this, and there, a lot of the core team members, basically, this is where they all started, right? They all started by making this ultimate effort. And that's what we hope for. We hope for 100 people that constantly make this ultimate effort, right? That are always contributing back, that can really just help the code be better. So what about the project, right? The project is growing, growing pretty well. I wanted to do the nice transition thing, but I kind of forgot about it. Anyway. We've got over 15 core team members now. Some of them take on different responsibilities than others. Some are working on server administration. Some are working on test cases. Some are working on new features. Some are working on bug fixes. So we've got, you know, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to build this community up, especially when we've got 120 translators and in 21 languages on the book. All these stats come from the book. You know, I just wanted to share some of them with you to let you know, like, this is why we're all here. I mean, this is why this Cake Fest is the biggest one that we've had, you know, and they continue to grow, even coming over to Berlin, right? 21 languages. I mean, not all of them have a ton of translation, but this is something that, you know, hopefully we get more involved in. There's the German translation I was looking at, and I think it's at like 35% or maybe less. And it would be great to see more, you know. And I think everybody benefits when they can actually read documentation in their own language. And we've built international, forget it. We built it into the core so we can have it in the book. You know what I'm talking about. I-18N, that's what it said. Anyway, 88,000 absolute unique visitors according to Google. I don't know, maybe there's a whole bunch of bots or something that are out there that are just running up these stats and counting our servers, but it seems like a pretty good number, you know, and I'm pretty proud of that number to see that, you know, in the last 4 years we went from, you know, 100 people to this. 2 million page views. This is all running on the book. This is all CakePHP, you know, and Joel's going to talk a little bit later about performance and some of the ways that we achieve these numbers. We've got, the book is just one of 5 sites that runs on the same server. We've had the same server for the last 4 years, basically. And the bakery gets almost as many page views, you know. So it's not like these are low. I think that the load is pretty good. Of course, this is over the month, but still, there's 12,000 a day. So they're not an insignificant number. 173 countries. Obviously, a lot of these are speaking English, but according to Google, there's 173 countries that are visited. And we still are growing at about 24% new visits a month, which is pretty nice to see. So going global, I just copied this right out of the analytics section, right? Just so you can kind of see what it is. And I can point out some people like Ando over here, who's my Japanese buddy, and he can look up there at number 2 and be like, hey, wow, man, number 2, Japan, woohoo! You know, the US is number 1, but, you know, I mean, look at this. We've got 20% new visits, there's 30% new visits in India, 30% new in Brazil. The Brazilian community is really growing big. People are spending a lot of time on the site. They're looking at a bunch of pages. They're not leaving very often. You know, I don't know. This seems, I'm pretty happy with these numbers, and we can see, okay, well, there's Germany at number 5. You know, well, what do we do? You know, what do we do about that? Let's get that. Maybe Germany's not that big. But certainly not as big as Brazil or India. But still, you know, Germany's sitting around there number 5, and that's why we're here. And we've got some French guys in the house too, and they've been doing a lot of good work, and they're up to number 4. Actually, France was below Germany a couple months ago. Not the case anymore. So those are, you know, it's cake is growing. Cake is international. Cake is you know, doing a lot of good stuff. So how do we share our code, right? This is what, you know, open source is all about. This is what we're having fun doing. We've got our stable build right now, which is 1.2.3, and we're fixing bugs on that, and hoping, you know, having a coming soon new release, stable. But things are relatively stable right now in the 1.2 series. And then we're working on these branches, right? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but we basically we're going to have multiple different branches of the code. Master is always going to reflect the stable build, right? And this is when I talk about the branches here, What I'm really talking about is, let's see, what did I, where? Oh, Git, going Git. So I'll go back to that other slide, but we're moving the project towards Git. It's been on SVN for the last 3 years. We started working with Git, I think about 9 months ago, 8 months ago. I built a website, web app that can help us with that. A lot of people have used it already. I think a lot of people here have used it already. The Chaw, it was kind of like the test bed for Git. Our goals with it are to encourage, one of them is to encourage more collaboration. You can fork things, you can, it's easier to commit patches, the diffs are simpler, all that kind of stuff. Git makes it a lot easier. It's fast, it's faster. That's ultimately why we like it. It's just plain faster. We've been able to use feature branches, and so we, I kind of mentioned this back here on the sharing code. We've got this 1.3 dash ... right? That's just an example of how we've set up our feature branches. So we've got, like I said, we've got 15 plus core members, and we, in order to challenge and incentivize, like we talked about, every developer will take a branch basically and say, I'm going to work on this. Mark Story's been the most active right now. He's got Bake, he's got JS helper branches, and there's some other ones that I'm going to talk about in the 1.3 line of code that we've been working on. And you can see all these branches. And this is how we've decided to organize it, because it makes sense for us. It's easy for me as project manager to take a branch and merge it in. It's actually easier than dealing with a fork or something like that. And so we've done this, and I think that you can use the same sort of thing in your own code if you choose to use Git. So we use feature branches, and then we've got stable branches. Stable branches being 1.2, master, and 1.3, right? Those are kind of the branches that we're trying to keep stable. And you can use any one of those, and that's one of the nice things. Maybe one app's using 1.2 and one's using 1.3, and you can switch between those depending on the apps pretty easily, very easily. And then we can have these local branches where I always have, every one of my applications has a local branch that is basically a mirror of master, but includes my own configuration for my local server. And then when I deploy something, I've got the same kind of idea. There's a local branch on that deployment server that holds all the configuration of for that server. And those never get pushed back into the remote, but they're there, and it's easy for me to merge from the stable branch into that local branch, right? And keep my configuration. I never have to worry about it. It's just an update and go, right? And this is, one of the things that SVN had, which was nice, was making it easy for deployment, and using these local branches, I think makes it really easy to maintain your local configurations, which is really nice. One of the problems with SVN is that you would make a change to your local configuration, and you couldn't really do anything with it. You couldn't commit it back to the central repository, because then it would be there to mess up everybody else, right? And if there was a change to that configuration file, for some reason, maybe adding a new feature, maybe changing something, right? If there was a change and you tried to update from that with SVN, you'd get a conflict, right? Git's a lot smarter with that. It handles the merging a lot better from the stables into the local branches. So, we can maintain those configs, and I think that's one of the huge benefits of using Git, and I've really come to appreciate a lot what that means. And it's not just about type, it's really about the ease of use, right? So, I think we're all here to be excited about what's coming up in Cake, right? We're all pretty fired up about the roadmap. We're all here to keep working hard, and so we got some new versions that we're working on. And 1.3, right? It's just based off of our 1.2 stable branch or stable version, which a lot, most of us are using now. We're adding in some features, deprecating a few things, removing some of the old deprecated stuff that was in 1.2, but ultimately trying to maintain some backwards compatibility where it makes sense. I think a lot of people that have been here for a while and used 1.1, right, they've experienced a little bit more difficult upgrade path to 1.2, and a lot of people didn't want to do it. Now, I think it was the right time for us to kind of break some stuff in order for us to move forward. I think now we write a lot less code than we had to back then, 3 years ago, or 2 years ago. But with 1.3, we're pretty happy with what we've got. We want to add some stuff, but not really break anything. So it'll be easy to upgrade. 2.0, right? This is something that we're working on right now, and the goal there is to have PHP 5 strict. Right out of the box, you get some performance increases from that, which is nice. And the goal there is to make it very easy to upgrade from 1.2 or 1.3 into 2.0. And with the same idea of 2.0 being based on 1.3 and maintaining that backwards compatibility, but at the same time adding in those PHP 5 features, static classes, visibility stuff, being able to take out a lot of the functions that we have in basics for to work across PHP 4, the object constructor that we've got that allows us to use construct even on PHP 4, but we can get rid of that stuff too. And a lot of things just are going to just work a little bit more easily on 2.0. And so we're pushing for that pretty hard, and we're hoping that everybody that can upgrade to PHP 5 or is already on PHP 5 will be able to just drop this thing in and go, right? Without too many changes to their code at all. Only the same changes that they would make if they were going to use 1.3. And then after that, there's plenty more. We'll talk about that some more later on in the weekend. Let's see. So here's some of the changes to 1.3 and are going into 2.0 as well. Mark Story, who some of you may know or may not know, he did the debug kit. He joined the team about a year ago and has just put in a tremendous amount of effort since then, been extremely dedicated to the project. Like I said, did the debug kit, which a lot of people use now. It's a really great example of a powerful plugin. It gives you a ton of information about what's going on inside of your application while you're developing it. And then the API generator as well, which we've upgraded. We've upgraded the API that uses reflection classes of PHP 5, and Mark did a ton of work on that, almost all of it. And he's been working on Bake. His goal for Bake was to make it easier for us to generate code. More templates, right? So you've got more control over the code that is generated. There's a new template task, so you could use that in your own shells if you want to. And that's it's a powerful feature that he tried to simplify some of the commands to make it easier to work with plugins too. So baking plugins now is a lot more intuitive. And this is one of the things that we're going to continue to push for in 1.3 and 2.0 just to make our lives easier. JS helpers. This was just a huge undertaking, I think, on his part with Nate's leadership on it, and the goal there being we didn't want to have a dependency on one in particular JavaScript library, right? So we've been since the beginning, we've been prototype, right? Our HX helper has been a prototype helper. Prototype wasn't that easy to write code in prototype, so we had this helper, and that was great, and it had a lot of really nice, convenient methods in it. And we realized, well, maybe we can abstract some of this out and we can make it possible for you to use jQuery, Prototype, new tools, Dojo, if you want, right? And so right now, I think Mark's implemented. It's not completely done. It hasn't. I don't think it's been merged. It hasn't been merged in yet. I haven't merged it in yet. I merged in bake, but I didn't push it up there. But jQuery works, Prototype works, and I think new tools works. And it's basically the same API as the Ajax, the current Ajax helper right now, except you can choose which library you want to use. And so then you can have that low-level functionality like linked forms and Ajax-y stuff, right? But you can use the library of your choice, which is kind of nice. The configure and app changes. This is one of the things that could break backwards compatibility, and that's why I wanted to talk about it a bit. That's why I put it up top. I committed this. This is actually in the 1.3 stable branch now. And basically what I did was I took all the configuration for all the paths. If you have model paths and view paths and component paths, and this is some of the more advanced stuff that sometimes people don't necessarily even use, and so hopefully it won't break. But if you were running a lot of test cases, you may have found yourself changing the paths so that you could have a test app like we have in the core. We've got a test app in the core, and so we change the paths for views and whatnot so we can make sure that we're testing the right stuff. So all that is now inside the app class. And you might remember app from the app importer. But now you build all your paths with app. You get all your objects. So like configure list objects is now app objects, and a lot of those configurations. So now the configure class is really just userland or core configuration. It's not handling any of the other object pathing stuff. And we have a migration guide that's available. We added a session model too. This is kind of nice. A lot of people wanted to use sessions inside of their models. So we have the session model now, which makes it easier if you use database sessions, and you can associate with user records via this model, which makes a bit more sense for you. Inflector changed in 1.3. We took out the inflections.php, so there's one less file we have to load on the dispatching process, and now you can just put that in Bootstrap, and you can just define your custom rules inside of there. So if you had some custom rules, maybe for your language or for some other reason, maybe the core wasn't doing the inflections that you wanted it to do, you'll have to change some stuff there, but it's relatively smooth change over. We renamed some libraries so the API generator would work better. So one of the things I noticed was that in one of my apps, in the CHA that I worked on, I was importing the cake schema, and now you actually have to say cake schema. It's called cake schema, and the file is cake_schema. So basically anything that was outside of conventions, we had some file names that were outside of conventions, weren't matching class names. Those have all been renamed. Hopefully they don't change too much inside your application, but that's one of the examples. It makes the API generator work a lot smoother right out of the box. So that was something we decided we needed to do. And then we removed all the deprecated methods. We'll probably deprecate some more methods just to make it easier to move to 2.0, I think, and to make changes to 2.0 down the road. But all these things are being merged into 2.0 as well, so that we don't get, we don't, and we're going to try and keep them in line as much as possible. Let's see, what's next? How much time we have? Let's see. Oh, this is where it all is. Code.cakephp.org. So the CHA has been kind of the home for cake-based, the CakePHP 1.3 and all of our Git repository. And what I did was I set up another install of the same application, which again was really nice because of Cake and because of Git. And it was very easy to put in a new theme, you know, and put in another branch with a theme in it, and then move that over, and I can basically keep this and the CHA in parallel in terms of the core code, and the only thing that changes in this really is this theme, which looks a lot like our other cake sets now. This was one of the things that, you know, we're really working on, is trying to consolidate, right? Trying to have more I don't know, symmetry across all these sites, right? So that you know what it is. Hopefully, I mean, eventually, probably like the forge will go away, and not quite sure yet if we want to have all that kind of 4G code on here, or if we're going to keep it on CHA. But the nice thing is that code.cakephp.org uses the same SSH keys as the CHA does, so that's easier. That's one of the things with Git that we had to implement, and it's one of the things from your perspective that may make it a little bit harder to get the code from the source code repository. You have to have SSH, and you have to use SSH to get access to this code right out of the repository. But you can see we've got the 2 versions up there. This is the latest code. You can go to it right now, I think, if things went well this morning. You know, if there's some problems with it, we'll fix those. But ultimately, we're going to try and keep all the cake stuff here, and I think it's going to make a lot of sense for us going forward to do that. What else do I got? So, how can you guys get involved some more? We want more help, right? We're 15 core members. We're a huge community. There's a ton of stuff that we have. There's the Google groups, the IRC blogs. I mean, all that stuff is extremely important to the whole community. Interacting with the community. Like I said, the more you get involved, the more you give back, the more benefit you actually get from it all. And there's so many ways to be involved. It's not just writing core code. It's not just writing tickets. It's not, it's providing your own code. And you can do that in the form of plugins, right? One of the things that we're really trying to work on, and this is something that if anybody's interested, we've been working on a plugin repository for a while. We announced the efforts at the last Cake Fest, which was in December. There's been Psychic, John Anderson, who has been doing our docs forever, since the beginning. He put in a ton of work on this plugins thing. I'm working on it. We really want to have a solid plugin repository where people can contribute to that and give back and use that inside of their own applications so that we can maximize the amount of reusable code we have. Plugins in 1.2 and going forward have gotten a lot better, a lot easier to use. From 1.3, you can have data sources inside of plugins now, so that's really nice. So if you got that Twitter data source, which is all hot these days, you can put that inside of a plugin and distribute it hopefully through the plugin repository. Bakery 2.0, I mean, we're working on, this is going to be based on Cake 2.0, and it's a rewrite. Alex over here is pretty much leading up that thing at this point, whether or not he knew that, I don't know. Yeah, he's got a lot more responsibility in that respect. He's worked a ton on the specs. He knows exactly where it's going. He's going to be focused on that. We've got CakePHP.bakery as a channel. I'd love to see more people get involved in that channel at this higher level. A lot of people have said to me, "Oh, pound CakePHP channel. There's just a ton of noise in there. There's a lot of new people coming in. Okay, my mod rewrite isn't working. Okay, yeah. There's a lot of people where that's a problem, and so there's a lot of new people that come in there, a lot of new faces, a lot of old faces that stick around and help out. And hopefully inside of the CakePHP Bakery channel, we can get some of those more experienced people in there to talk about some of these other things, help out with the plugin repository, help out with Bakery 2.0, and help out with any other projects that we want to see. Maybe the bin, like for instance the bin. I would love to get some more help on that. I mean, these are a lot of things that I have to manage, right? And the more help I can get from everybody in here, the easier, the easier it is for me, and the more I can work on other stuff too. So, if there's features in the bin we want to see, or we want to do a rewrite for 2.0 of that, that would be great. That's something that gets used a tremendous amount. And have it open source for everybody to use inside of their own company, behind a firewall or something, which is great, so you can share with everybody you're working on, or if you've got freelancers you're working with, or if you're a freelancer yourself and you're working with a client, right, you can show them stuff. Right? That bin works pretty well, and it's easy to set up. It's Cake, and so help out, help. Forks, the forks of Cake. You'll be on code.cakephp.org. You'll be able to have your fork of CakePHP, and you'll be able to push stuff up there. And we'll figure out, come into IRC and let us know. I just made a change. I had a guy in IRC, Farhadi, and he made a change to fix up something inside of DVO source, I think, which was a good change. To happen. You wrote a test case for it, you wrote a patch for it, you pushed it into its fork, and now I can go and grab it out, right? And this is one of the ways, that you guys can get involved, and the more involvement you show, that way, if you want to become part of the core team, that's the way to do it. I do get asked a lot, how do I become part of the core team? This is how to do it, right? Get involved with these other things. This is everybody that's on the core team now got involved in one of these things, and then eventually started committing tests and patches to the core itself. What else do I got? Questions? Let's see. Yeah. This is me. Wow, I did a pretty good job. gwu@cakephp.org. If you didn't already know my address. CakeFoundation.org. We're going to try and do a lot more stuff there. I'd like to be able to put a lot more focus in there. I'm going to get some help from some other friends out here in the community to help make that more of a real foundation. It's been around since 2005. It can do more for us, I think. It's one of the things that helps us do this event, and so does the CakePHP. That's where I work. We've got a lot of core team members at the CakePHP. We do a lot of client work. We give a lot back to the project. We sponsor here, and we're looking for more friends. So anyway, anyone have any questions? No?
Data sources and plugins. So when that works now?
I don't know if it's been merged in yet, but it will be eventually before 1.3 is released. Data source. He asked about data sources and plugins, if you can hear it. Dave's got the patch for that, and I think I got to merge it in somewhere along the line. Yeah.
Do you have a release date for the Cake plugins?
Oh man, I would love to get that out, really as soon as possible. I was doing some refactorings on it. It's one of those things where the organization is, I wanted to have it out before this event. It's close. If I can get some other people to come into the Cake Bakery channel and install the thing and test it out and try and see if it's working, then we'll be able to release it a lot sooner. And hopefully, one of the ideas is to use like the CHA, which I didn't show a picture of, but that's a repository where people can host projects, and I'm going to open up doors to that more. And we can host the plugins there, and then hopefully just pull directly from those repositories with plugins set up and things like that. Worry about dependencies and that kind of stuff. But that's the kind of stuff we need to test a lot more before we can actually release it too. So, I'd like to release it as soon as possible. But the more help we get, the sooner that'll happen.
The CakePHP 1.2, right?
Is it and on SVN and on PIP?
Right now, we've been committing all bug fixes for 1.2 have been going into SVN, and then I pull those down pretty much weekly. I push them to the 1.2 branch, merge them into 1.3. Master, like I said, is still the stable. I'd like to see more people move over to the Git repo so we can get rid of the SVN repo. And I think ultimately maybe we'll be able to set up a mirror so if you're using SVN you can do that, but you know, you'll be able to just keep using SVN as well in terms of your own deployment. I know that I use the current SVN repository for deployment too, and so I'm in the process of moving over all my things to Git as well, and it does take some time. So that's why we still have the stable in SVN, probably be in there until 2.0 is stable or 1.3 is stable. Anyone else? Questions? Comments? Cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks again.